Hi, folks. I'm doing the final installment of Cory Doctorow's novella, Unauthorized Bread. This is part 3. It's just one part of this book. It's about 100 pages, and I've read 75 pages so far, and so I'm going to read the last 25 tonight. And for those of you who might have been following along, the last segment that I was reading, essentially, Salima, who's the refugee living in the poor floors of this affordable housing complex, mostly of immigrants, they had the kids, they had jailbroke all of these Internet of Things appliances for the companies that had gone out of business, bankrupt, so that they could use them just the way, however they wanted to use them. Like for this unauthorized bread, they have a toaster that they're only allowed to toast certain bread in the toaster. And so the kids had gone around to all of their neighbors and fixed the appliances so they could use them however. But then what happened in the second reading was the two companies, the dishwasher company Disher and Boulangism, who had the Internet of Things toaster, got bought out by like a new hedge fund. And so they were in the process of coming back online. And then the trick was they were going to realize that they weren't getting revenue streams off of these appliances. And all of the people who had, fixed the appliances were at risk of being kicked out of their housing. And as immigrants, that was really bad. And I see someone says, who eats toast? But this toaster, so these are tiny apartments, literally like one-room studios where the sofa folds into a bed, and the table folds into a night table, and everything is really compact. And I don't know if you've seen, like, I get these ads sometimes online. It's like, sous vide, your kitchen robot, and they're going over to sous vide, and like you're putting in some wad of something. And I kind of feel like sous vide is the boulangism. It's not really a toaster, like just toast, but it's probably some sort of, like, essentially it's like their oven, like the oven of these tiny studio apartments. And so if they wanted to eat, they needed to have a toaster that worked. And in the first section, there was an older man who he couldn't use his toaster, and so he was living off of peanut butter. So they've come back, and there's a young boy. Salima's friend Nadifa has a son who's like a young teenager, and he's been sort of a leader in doing all of the fixing of the appliances, and he's very proud of himself because he actually feels empowered in his life. And essentially what happens in the second section is that Salima, they're trying to figure out what to do, and they're reading all these message boards, and because they don't want to get into trouble, and they realize there are really serious consequences for interfering with copyrighted material, and they don't want to all go to jail and lose their housing. And she just so happens to be writing the tea, and sees that there's a young woman with a hang tag, like a corporate ID on her neck for Boulangism, who turns out to be like an MIT student who got recruited to work for this company to like bring it back online. And so they have this long conversation, and she's trying to confide in this woman to see if she can get information about like what advice to trust online. And eventually she avails herself of this young woman's help, and the young woman's ready to help her. And then she realizes that Salima realizes she shouldn't have asked, because that's a really terrible situation to put someone in. So she comes back, and essentially they're just like, we have to reset all of the appliances back to what they used to be. And the little boy, Adibrahim, is really upset about it. So where we're starting now is Salima's gone to Nadifa's apartment, her friend, and told Adibrahim that even though he's done such an amazing job with like organizing all the kids to handle like managing these appliances, that now they have to put it back the way it was. And he's being very mature about it, but he's very upset. Okay, so a sense of purpose is a wonderful tonic for anxiety. Now Salima knew what she had to do. The helpless fretting was replaced by a boundless energy. After an early breakfast, she rang Nadifa to confirm that Adibrahim was awake, and she bounded up the stairs 2 at a time and showed him how to reset the factory defaults on everything in their apartment, just as she had done in her own place. And she made him run through it twice to make sure he had it, and then made him write out the procedure from the memory on the notepad. He was a quick study, as she knew he would be. Now you need to spread the word. Can you have the children come to my place again tonight after school and before supper, say 6 p.m.? He wasn't happy about it. They will hate this. I know, I hate it. It's like giving up. But giving up is smarter than fighting a battle you can't win. And that is an important lesson, as any, And Nadifa nodded. There are much harder ways to learn that lesson. And she got a faraway look. And Adi Ibrahim looked miserable. I know this is very hard. Salima said. You were a hero when you taught your friends, and now you're going to be that frightened boy who made them put it all back. I'll take the blame. I'll explain it to them. Just bring them to my place, all right? A night's sleep had done her so much good. Her day went so smoothly it might have been oiled. She found some small systematic errors in the books of the dry cleaners that explained why his profits had been consistently down, and he confessed that he had been about to fire his sole employee for stealing, and he was so relieved that he hugged her. She got a seat on the tee both ways. Spring had finally stopped oscillating between freezing and basting and settled on a sunny, breezy, happy medium that scudded the fluffy clouds overhead like a screensaver, and the new buds on the trees all seemed to have burst overnight. She bought a much bigger bag of snacks for the night's meeting, mindful of the previous meeting's shortcomings. She had to shop in the boulangism aisle of the corner market for bread. And she bought coffee pods and dishwasher soaps in the adjacent sections. That brought her down, making the last block home a slow march. She thought back to her first meeting with Y, that's the young tech girl, about Y's horror that anyone would use a boulangism. And Salima was earning well now, even saving every month, a savings that had grown for the months when she'd been able to choose her groceries from anywhere in the shop. There were places to live that weren't Dorchester towers, places where she could choose which appliances she used. They were more expensive, and so many of the rental ads had fine print notifying the prospective tenants that their lease prohibited alteration of the landlord's revenue-earning appliances. But they existed. With a roommate or two, she could afford one. But Dorchester Towers wasn't just where she lived, it was a little community. It was a place where she fit, where she had friends, and people were something like family, like Nadifa and the kids who called her auntie. People who understood what she had been through. Imagine living in a house full of wise girls who seemed so young, with an unbridgeable canyon between their life experiences and her own. The kids in the elevator lobby asked her excitedly about the meeting that night, and she understood that Adi Ibrahim hadn't given them any hints as to the agenda. She couldn't blame him. They crowded in and ate all of the snacks. There may not be enough snacks in the world to fill all of those little bellies. This isn't going to be easy to hear. The whispering and grins and fidgeting ended in an instant, and every eye was on her. So much for her perfect day. Since our last meeting, I have learned some things. Important things, she told them. She told them about the law and about the prison sentences and about the new companies that had been formed out of the remains of the old ones and the teams they'd hired to catch the cheaters like them and the risks to them and their families, eviction and worse. She watched their faces go grave and graver. The chubby girl, the bright one who'd put up her hand the last time, was the first to speak when Salima finished. How do we solve it? It was a terrible moment, and the worried faces brightened, and the whole room's attention was intensely fixed upon her. These kids were bright enough to understand the risks, but not bright enough to figure out that she couldn't do anything to fix it. We can't. We have to put it all back the way it was, undo it all, factory defaults for everything. And before anyone could say anything, she said, "It's over." The kids' faces said it all, shock and then disbelief and then defiance and muttering the word no quietly and then louder and then racing from kid to kid. "Yes," she shouted, holding her hands up. "Listen, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But yes, we have to do this. It was a mistake." And she held her hands higher. It was getting louder. "I mean it. We'll find something else. You can help me, but first we have to do this." Some of the kids were leaving, and she saw Adi Ibrahim shake his head. "It has to be this way." And more left. "Please." Adi Ibrahim was the last one there. "I'm sorry," was all he said before he too left. She wouldn't surrender, of course. She started with the people she'd serviced, working from the upper floors downward, doing 2 or 3 a night. A Ibrahim came along sometimes and helped, but he was clearly unenthused about the work, and he made mistakes that set her back as often as he helped. She didn't think it was exactly on purpose, but it certainly wasn't exactly an accident either. Many times she was tempted to text Y and set up a meeting to pump her for information about the state of boulangism and how long she had before they were up and running again. She had reasoned that the building's owners wouldn't expect full revenue straight away after the toasters started working again. I mean, it would take a while for people to notice that their appliances were working and switch from whatever arrangement they'd made during the outage. But there would come a time when it would be obvious that it had all been fiddled unless she put it back. Working in her neighbor's apartment, she saw their kids who had watched her jailbreak their apartments and gone on to do the same for the neighbors. The kids who walked out on her when she told them they'd have to put it all back the way they'd found it. Kids who watched her out of the corners of their eyes pretending to do homework. She made a point of describing the consequences of getting caught for their parents in a loud voice and in an eye-watering detail. It took her 5 nights and all weekend to work through the apartments she'd personally jailbroken. On Monday night, she came home from work, bolted a humiliating prepackaged approved dinner from the microwave, and headed out to the top poor floor, 7 floors above. She waited briefly for the elevator and then admitted that the only reason she'd tried for an elevator was that she knew it was prime time, and she might kill half an hour or even 45 minutes waiting for a car to come, putting off what would come next by that much. She took the stairs and knocked on the first floor beside the stairwell after carefully noting its number in a little notebook she'd brought with her in her neat bookkeeper's hand. The woman who answered was a little familiar, someone she'd shared an elevator with once or twice. Salvadoran or Honduran, she thought. Yes? She was a little older than Salima. Hi. She had rehearsed this, but her mouth dried and the words wouldn't come. Hi. I live in the building, and that was wrong. Did some of the building's kids help you with your kitchen appliances or maybe your thermostat? The woman looked suspicious. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I don't think so. Salima's cheeks and ear tips burned. I'm sorry to bother you, honestly, but look, these days, the day the toasters stopped working, I figured out how to get mine to work again. And then I showed some of the kids, and they went all over and they did it for everyone else. But then I found out that the manufacturers can tell who's done this, and they can come after us for it. The landlords too, and they got a cut of the money that we spent. And so I've come to put it all back before we get in trouble and before we all get in trouble. And she gave her best, most trustworthy smile. The woman shook her head. I never had any kids around here. Salima was sure she was lying. The quickness of her answer, the way she looked around as she said it, look, if I don't do this, you will get caught. You could lose your home. Worse, they can send the kid who did it to jail. That wasn't quite true based on what Y had told her, but it was nearly true. The kid could get in trouble, she was sure, and of course so could she. Please, I told you, no kids. Can I see then? The woman looked angry. I mean, maybe you forgot. Can I check just to be sure? I have to go. The door clicked shut before she could get another word in. She was conscious of the camera on her, and so she kept her face neutral as she made a note in her notebook and then took a deep breath and moved on to the next apartment. It was going to be a long night. Work became kind of a dream or a waking nightmare in which she returned over and over to do the real job, racing through the floors of the building, knocking on the doors, begging near strangers to let her make them poorer and make their lives worse. Word had gotten around, and she got curious stares and sometimes hostile ones in the elevators. And Ibrahim wasn't even pretending to help anymore. She didn't complain to Nadifa because she didn't want to have to confess all her sins to the last real friend she had. She got better at pitching her case at the door anyway, and almost everyone let her into their places to do her business, which she'd gotten better at, working through appliances with a quick and practiced hand. In private moments at night, searching for elusive sleep, she admitted to herself that some of the kids were probably going around and undoing everything she'd done with the complicity of the adults who should have known better. Every time she rode home from the dry cleaners, she looked for Y on the T, not sure if she should be happy or frightened to see her. And she never found her. But then one afternoon, as she was trying to find her own errors in the work she'd done closing the quarter for the ice cream shop, numbers swimming before her eyes. Her phone chirped. I need to talk to you. Why? She opened her little notebook and looked at the apartment numbers. She'd gotten through more than 3/4 of the places, and most of them had let her work. And some of them would have been reverted by kids, but perhaps it was still enough. Maybe Y had found a trick that would let them keep their jailbreaks after all, something foolproof. But only fools believed in foolproof tricks. I finish at 5. I'm on the Mass Ave today near Harvard Square. I can meet you, 5:15 at the Cannon in Cambridge Common. Okay. A foolish hope grew in Salima despite her best efforts. She'd never forgotten the excitement that Y had spoken when she had started thinking about how to help them all beat boulangism, the absurd certainty that she'd radiated, that she could outsmart the whole industry. And perhaps she could, though of course she couldn't. Summer was in full roast, and it was hot and sticky with a few students left this late in the year. And she fanned herself with the folding Chinese fan she'd bought from a cart a few days before when the heat came on and the humidity soared. And she thought that Arizona was hot, but this humidity was trying to strangle her from the inside out. Feeling that called to mind dark and buried memories of the Mediterranean crossing when she had been a small child, sense memories of thirst and nausea and stink. And she fanned herself and looked around, but she didn't see why until she was right there, because she'd cut her ash blonde hair sensibly short for the heat and put some pink tint in it. She was thinner than the last time they'd met and paler. Long hours, Salima guessed. You came, Y said. Hi, Salima said, I came. She was still embarrassed by their last meeting. I'm sorry about before. It was very nice of you to offer, but yeah, I know the risk. I understand it. I mean, sort of. I mean, I can't really understand what you've gone through, but she armed sweat from her forehead. I mean it. I get it. I'm sorry too. And don't be sorry. She was really sweet. I've been putting it all back, everything reset to factory defaults, and no one wants to help me, though. The kids hate me for it. That sucks. It does. Look, I wanted to meet you because there's something happening at Boulangism I thought you'd be interested in, but you can't talk about it because I'm not supposed to be telling anyone without getting a non-disclosure first. Is that okay? I mean, can I tell you and you'll keep it a secret? She nodded, of course. So we were almost ready to relaunch, and then the new owners bought 2 more of our competitors and folded us all together in a single platform. And now we're a lot bigger, and they have all these plans like letting people buy jailbreaks by the day or the week so they can cook anything they want. Oh my God. Now just think about BlackRock and Blackstone. Blackstone is the largest residential property owner right now, rental. And all of them set up with smart appliances. Okay, so we are almost ready to relaunch, and then the new owners bought 2 more of our competitors and folded us all together into a single platform. And now that we're a lot bigger, and they have all these plans like letting people buy jailbreaks by the day or the week so they can cook anything they want. They've been watching the darknet boards, and they know that everyone's been figuring out how to jailbreak their shit while we've been getting restarted, and they'll figure out all those people could be customers. But instead of paying for food, we'll sell them, we'll pay them to use food someone else sold them. Salima almost laughed. It was a crime if she did it, a product if they sold it to her. Everything could be a product. It's weird, I know, but here's where you come in. They've got this research unit, anthropologists and data scientists and marketers, and they want to talk to people like you and find out what you'd pay for different kinds of products. And they'd want to see if you'd sell the package to your neighbors and if you could get a cut of money from them, like a commission. They've got one plan where you could teach those kids you were working with to sell paid unlocking to the people in your building, and they'd get a commission, and you'd get a commission because you recruited them. Is this a pyramid scheme? It's an affiliate program. The kids wouldn't be allowed to recruit people to work under them, and we would handpick the affiliate recruiters, and then they'd be the only ones who'd get the double commission. Leaders. I mean, it's still just an idea, but when I heard about it, I immediately thought of you. I mean, it solves all your problems, doesn't it? I mean, the kids get to go legit, even if it makes some pocket money, and you get to use your skills and the respect of your neighbors to help them out and earn some money for yourself. Oh, and of course, you get to permanently unlock everything that we make so that you could demonstrate it for your neighbors. I mean, like I said, it's not a sure thing, but I thought you could come in and meet the team and talk it over, maybe make a call. She trailed off, searching Salima's face for a clue about her reaction. Salima carefully maintained a neutral expression. "Why," she said. "It's so kind of you to think of me, really." But Salima slumped. "I don't know. There's a but I can't say what it is exactly." "It's a weird idea." Well, I said, "I know. But maybe you could think about it for a while. I mean, I don't need an answer right now." Salima wanted to just say no, but she couldn't. Even as something inside her was recoiling at the offer, another part of her understood that Y might be right, that this could be her very best option. "How long do you think we have? Until you have to decide?" Salima had thought of Y as her ally, every bit as offended by the lockdown of Dorchester Towers as she was. But Y had been working long hours for Boulangism and its new sister companies, and she thought the problem was that Salima didn't want to get into trouble. Salima had been thinking that too, but that wasn't the problem. I mean, Boulangism itself was the problem. The whole business was the problem. Until Boulangism finds out what we've been doing and gets us evicted. Y shook her head. "Didn't you hear me? That won't happen because they're trying carrots these days, not sticks. They want to treat people like you as their customers, not crooks." "Okay, sure. But how long until that happens?" Y looked hurt. "I don't know. Soon. Though, I mean, a week or two. They're really excited about the unlock upsell, but they wanted to do a little research on the price point before they roll it out, so they'll delay things a while. But the owners aren't going to keep paying everyone's salaries forever without any money coming in. Couple of weeks. She could get through the places she'd missed and start over on the top floor and work her way down, impressing on people that it was essential that they tell her if they'd let the kids fiddle with their stuff again. "Yeah, look, Salima, I really think you should consider this. It's a good plan, good for everyone." "I will." Her voice sounded unconvincing even to her own ears. Y looked even more distraught, and Salima felt bad. She'd only wanted to help. "Salima, have you had dinner? I'm crazy hungry. Do you like fish? There's a fish place near here. Amazing. The kind of place where visiting parents take their kids for a good meal during the school year. Ever since I started taking home a paycheck, I've been meaning to go back, but I've been too busy. Would you join me? I'll pay. I don't want to have to eat alone." "No," she wanted to say. No, I have to go back home and get to work. "No, I can't afford your charity because you might have to testify against me. No, I don't need to be friends with anyone from your world." "Yes," she said, "that would be very nice." She was too hungry to say no, and she was sick of overpriced, prepackaged microwave meals. So she got home after 10, much too late to ring anyone's doorbell and have an awkward conversation about their appliances, and the elevator had been blessedly responsive, which was a good thing, since between the wine and the stress of the recent weeks, she wasn't going to be able to climb the stairs or even stay awake very long in the lobby. The elevator smelled of expensive hair product, telling her that it had only been recently vacated by someone who'd gone out the other doors on the way to have a nice date night, or maybe on the way back in, relieving the babysitter and making a midnight snack in an oven that cooked anything you told it to. The smell lingered in her nostrils, citrus and tobacco, as she trailed her hand down the corridor wall to her apartment. She was about to open her door when she saw the words scrawled there in fat, permanent marker. "Fuck off." The letters were large, angry, and yet uncertain, like they'd been written by a child or perhaps someone who was just learning English. She was so tired. She licked her finger and rubbed at the ink. It didn't even smear. And then she let herself in and went to the camera feed for her door and discovered that it was blank, perfectly erased. So maybe it was a kid who'd written it, a kid who'd learned to search the darknet for ways to control technology designed to control them. A kid who was outraged at being asked to forget how to do it and go back to being meekly controlled. Would a kid like that ever work on commission, installing official unlocking codes in the poor floor apartments of Dorchester Towers? Was there enough money in the world? And if there was, did she want to be the one who used that money to convince a kid to give up on that uncompromising ferocity? She'd buy some solvent on her way home from work the next day. She ran into Nadifa on the stairs the next morning, struggling with the stroller, chivying Idle, the older girl, and carrying Yasmin, the toddler. And Salima looked at the stroller and Idle, leaving Nadifa to sling Yasmin around along her hip and hold the rail with her free hand. And Nadifa sighed and thanked her. "You look terrible," Nadifa said, 3 flights down. "I didn't sleep well." "You haven't been by in so long. The retin-A is starting to pile up in my refrigerator." Her eyes welled up and she blinked hard. She missed Nadifa, and she missed the days when she'd overflowed with excitement of mastering the building. The rearguard action of putting everything back had filled her with a buried and unspeakable shame. And just thinking of showing her face to Nadifa made her feel sick. But it was so good to see her again. "I'm sorry. It's been hard." She swallowed, and then she told Nadifa about the words on her door, using careful euphemisms in front of the kids. She told Nadifa about the cameras. She stopped short of telling her about Ibrahim abandoning her. She wanted a friendly shoulder to lean on, not retribution for a 13-year-old. "Oh, that's terrible. I'll come by when you get home from work and we'll clean it together." "It's okay. I can do it." She thought of telling Nadifa about the offer from Y, but she didn't. I mean, Nadifa might tell her to do it or tell her not to. Her arms and back were on fire when they reached the ground level. "Thank you so much," Nadifa said as she unfolded the stroller. "Normally, I wouldn't try to leave until the rush was over, but Edel has to see the dentist this morning." Edel smiled up at her, showing cute gaps in her teeth. Nadifa strapped the baby into the stroller, and then she swept Salima up into a fierce hug. "It will be okay. You've been through so much worse than this. You are strong." And Salima embarrassed herself by snuffling up snot, but the alternative was leaking it all over Nadifa's shoulder, and Nadifa had the manners to pretend not to notice anyway, so she was able to salvage a little dignity at least. She didn't get a seat on the T that morning, and as she hung from the strap, rocking back and forth with the train's motion, she stared idly at the ad over her head, eyes unfocused with sleepiness, and it was only as she got off the train that she realized it had been an ad for the new Boulangism. She got a text from Y on the escalator. "Affiliate program is a go. Can I hold a place for you in it? You in?" She marked it unread so she'd remember to reply to it later. Every time she looked at her screen that day at work, she saw the alert. It was so hard to concentrate. She made a mistake early on and ended up spending an hour unraveling it. It wasn't a good day. "I think I need to talk to Ibrahim." Nadifa looked puzzled. "Well, then talk to him." Salima swirled the wine in her glass. "The problem is that he hasn't been very eager to talk to me. He's angry." "Adi, come here." And he came out of his room, wooden-faced. "I'm doing homework." "Auntie Salima would like to talk to you." "All right," said in a tone that made it clear it was anything but. He got the idea of the pay to unlock as quickly as she laid it out for him, quicker than she had. "It's like my school books. I can read them at school or home, but if I want to study in the park, I have to pay to unlock them." Wow. I'm going to say that again. "It's like my school books. I can read them at school or home, but if I want to study in the park, I have to pay to unlock them." "I didn't know they worked that way." He shrugged. "It's okay. I don't need to study in the park." "And Auntie Salima would make money too," Nadifa said, "so she can save and get a place of her own." She looked sharply at Nadifa. "Why would I want to leave Dorchester Towers?" Nadifa snorted. "Who wouldn't want to leave if they could? I mean, move somewhere with a proper elevator, real appliances, a place where you were wanted." Nadifa trapped in her apartment every day until the elevator rush ended, or having to drag her stroller and the baby, a small child, down 42 floors worth of stairs. Of course she wanted to go, but how was that ever going to happen? She'd been a tailor in Somalia, but she hadn't worked in a shop in more than a decade. And by the time Yasmin was in school for full days, it would be nearly 20 years. And even if she could find work, a seamstress's salary, that wasn't going to pay full rent in Boston and support 3 kids. Salima was careful with money, careful like a bookkeeper. She lived on her own and she had saved up some real money, especially when she'd been able to cook any food she wanted and she could buy ingredients instead of ready-to-eat meals. She could move out now if she wanted to find a housemate, and if she signed up 1 or 2 more bookkeeping clients, she'd be able to keep a place of her own within a year. But she never thought of leaving Dorchester Towers. It was where she belonged. I wouldn't go. I would want to see your kids grow up. Don't be ridiculous. We come and visit as soon as you can go. You should. Adi Ibrahim watched the 2 grown women politely argue, and Salima wondered how much of the subtext he was getting. She wondered how much she was getting. It's not right to charge your neighbors to use their own things, he said, breaking in. Nadifa was about to say something to him about respecting his auntie, but Salima cut her off. Do you think so? Of course. He said it so quickly, so firmly, she knew that there was no room for argument. Why? Because it's their homes. Why should they have to pay to use things in their homes? I agree with you, but the company would say it's because they chose to live in a place where the rent was lower because the landlord thought he'd make money from the appliances. It was a deal and their end of it, if they can pay more somewhere else if they want that choice. Can we pay more? Nadifa snorted. Not until you graduate from college and I get a good job, Adi. He looked at Salima. I know, I didn't say I agreed with it. I just said that's what they would say. There's lots of deals you can make, and the deal here is you have to use their products. And that way they make them the most money or pay to unlock them. And that says that they're getting more choice because they'll let you buy an unlocking. But we already have that choice. She looked sharply at him. No, you don't. Not if you'd restored your appliances to the defaults. He looked guilty for an instant, and then he said, okay, well, we had that choice, and we can get it for ourselves again for free. You showed us. That slow roll in her gut. Again, he'd unlocked it all, everything in their home, and if they were going to get caught, everyone was going to get caught, and Adi Ibrahim wouldn't do as she asked. Who would? She took a deep breath. What I'm about to say isn't how I see things. It is how the company sees them. And they'll say that you don't have the choice, that they have that choice, and they will sell it to you. But if you take it without paying, that's stealing. Again, that's what they think. He was fast. But you'll be able to unlock all your things without paying, right? So isn't that stealing? A sharp little boy with the smarts of someone who had to think fast all the time with bad consequences for getting it wrong. Because I would be working for the company against your neighbors. But you say you wouldn't leave here because you belong here. But you get treated like you're better than us. He was losing his cool. Still a boy after all. She didn't let herself get angry. Sneaking a look at Nadifa, she saw her friend was very thoughtful, forgetting to tell off her son for disrespecting his elder. I don't think I'm better. The company just saw my skills and offered me a job. Like your mother getting money when she sews someone clothes. They pay you too, remember? I wouldn't take their money. He looked at his mother. I have homework to do. Do your homework. And he got up and went into the other room, and they didn't look at each other. What will you do? Nadifa asked, and Salima shrugged. I'll have to think about it. Weiss sent her 2 more texts before bed, which she didn't answer, and she fell asleep at last with the hum of the air conditioning and the fridge compressor in her ears. Her phone rang while she was brushing her teeth. Why? She spat and rinsed and didn't answer, and it rang again and again. Hello? I'm sorry to be such a nag, but it's kicking off over here. The board loved the affiliate ID, and they pressed ahead with it, throwing tons of engineers at it. They want us all to do a big release next week, press conference and everything, with the affiliates in 8 countries. and they love your story and they want to feature you. You can even get money for the publicity work, and you can help out, and to help out you out with missing work. I've been at the office since 6 a.m. and it turns out I'm the only one here who knows a real life jailbreaker, and that makes me the resident expert. She giggled nervously. I'm sorry. I mean, it just happened. But we need to move everything. Everything is waiting on you. She couldn't think of anything to say. Hello, Salima. Why? Salima, I know it's crazy, but this solves everyone's problems. Please say you'll come at least and talk to them. I have to work. Where? We can come to you. She felt trapped. I'm working at home today. She got to do that every week or two when there was a lot of little reconciling jobs to do. Perfect. That's just perfect. I'll text you when we know our arrival time, okay? Why? But she already hung up. And after that, Salima couldn't concentrate at all. She listened to the sounds of her neighbors leaving for work, and then the mothers with the little kids moving through the halls, heading to one another's places, accompanied by piping children's voices for playdates and friendly commiseration. The number swam on her big screen, refusing to cohere. She placed the tiny apartment and then the corridor. Her little notebook was in her pocket, the apartment numbers and the dates and her notes, and she'd been in so many of these places. ETA 15 minutes, okay? She sighed. Okay. And she went back into her place to listen for the downstairs buzzer. At least they were arriving after the morning rush, so they wouldn't have to wait too long for the elevator. Indeed, they were at her door in just minutes after she buzzed them in. Why, and the two guys, one white and one Indian, both in boulangism tees, both with youthful haircuts and big polished straight-tooth smiles. Thank you for seeing us, the Indian one said. He was called Paul, but his business card said Prit Paul, and he refused tea and water, and as had the white guy, Raj. But Y had accepted a coffee and watched intently as Salima fed a pod into the machine and put a cup beneath, and then ejected the pod and threw it out. It's okay, she said. Y was very excited about it. Y had the good grace to look a bit chagrined, and Paul didn't notice. She's been very excited about you too. We've heard a lot about you, and honestly, you couldn't be more perfect for what we have in mind. We think it could be very big. He held his hands up, arms spread as wide as he could in the crowded room. Very big. Good for us, good for you, and good for people like you. People like me? People who fall between the cracks, people who can't afford to pay full price for everything, but who sometimes want to splurge on more features for a special occasion. It's really the best of both worlds, a new kind of flexibility. The old boulangism owners were blind to that, but we're totally energized about the possibilities of working with our customers, not against them. We hope you'll be a part of that. There was a space in the conversation here where Salima would say something positive. Everyone in the room wanted her to say something positive. The conversation had a shape or maybe a direction, and she could pat it on the back and give it a little push in that direction, and then the next stop would be something glad from Paul or Y or the white guy, and then back to her, and push and push and push until it had picked up enough velocity that no one could stop it. It seemed petty to refuse then, but she could see that positive word here was a ticket on an express train with no more stops. That sounds very nice, but I don't think I'm the right person for you. And Y looked shocked. And Paul and the white guy looked wooden for a moment and then pasted on smiles. Of course, we respect your decision, but I wonder, could you tell us why? I mean, we've come a long way to talk with you about this after all. I mean, maybe if you explain your reservations, we can learn something from you that will help us do better in our next meeting. She didn't say that she hadn't asked them to come over. I just don't feel right about it. I mean, I understand your idea here that you're selling us more freedom, right? So remember that on the blockchain and the smart contracts and the things with rules and the things without rules. I just don't feel right about it. I understand your idea here that you are selling us more freedom. But that's only because our appliances take away so much freedom to begin with, and then they sell it back. But no one forced you to choose your boulangism. You chose the product that came with restrictions, and in return, you got a deal on your rent. Do you have a Boulangism toaster? No, I don't. Why not? Well, it's not the choice we've made, the white guy said. We chose a different deal, and that's the great thing about freedom. We all get to choose the proposition that suits us best. And Salima managed a tight little smile. You keep talking about choosing. I mean, this is the only place I could get into, and it took months. How is this a choice? Well, you were living somewhere else before this place, right? A refugee shelter. Well, you could have chosen to stay there, right? She wanted these people gone. I don't think that's much of a choice. And he shook his head. The point is that you had a choice. And that's because appliances like ours made it economical for landlords to buy subsidy units. And she didn't say anything. She was getting angry, and she didn't like to be angry, and she didn't want to show these people that she was angry. We want to help you people, let you get more out of your lives, give you more choices. What about the choice to jailbreak my things? Well, she didn't ask it. Honestly, I can't understand your decision here. Choice is good so long as I don't choose not to help you. She didn't say it. Can't you see that we want to help you? I can see that you want me to help you get more money from people like me. Well, maybe we should just go, I said. Unlike the two men, she was paying attention to Salima's reactions. We were just having a friendly conversation, the white guy said. We don't want to have to be back in the office for an hour anyway. Salima, can you just tell us what the problem is? She heard herself say, I would rather help my neighbor save the money than spend it. Well, what's that supposed to mean? Unlocking your toaster could save tons if you're smart about bulk groceries and what you cook. Again, her voice said, we'd save more money if we didn't have to pay to unlock our toasters. I don't see what that... Okay, he stopped. Oh, yeah, sure. But you know what's happened if you got caught doing that. I would rather help them not get caught. He snorted. Everyone gets caught. Well, how would you know? The people you never caught would be the people you never knew about. She met his eyes. He was angry now, red, flushed, a vein showing in his forehead. Yeah, maybe so, but that's not going to be you, lady. We know what's going on here. You know, you're on our radar. I mean, I hope you've got all your shit right, because if there's anything out of order here, we'll see it. We'll know who to talk to first. Y opened her mouth and shut it. And she gave Salima an apologetic look. She was also flushed, and Paul stood up. I think we'd better be going. Thank you very much for your time, Salima. And she watched them leave. And then after the door closed, opened it slightly and put her eye to it to watch them call the elevator, wanting to be sure they left without talking to her neighbors. Moments after they pressed the call button, the doors opened, and there was a surprised-looking woman already in the car, a woman she'd never seen before, dressed in a smart summer weight suit, smart makeup, smart little haircut, someone from the other side whose elevator should never, ever open on a poor floor. The three Boulangism employees nodded at her as though nothing was amiss and stepped into the car, and when they turned around, she caught Y's eye for a moment, and Y shrugged and grimaced in an eloquent expression of ambiguous apology. Was she sorry for the way her boss had spoken, for the threat, for the fact that the elevators came for them when they called them, but not for Salima? Salima climbed 7 floors to Nadifa's floor and rang her bell. They only had to wait a few minutes in the school office before Ibrahim appeared. Mama, he looked worried, and then we saw Salima confused. Come on, we'll talk about it as we walk, Nadifa said, giving him a complicated look that silenced any questions. That was a look that must have had a lot of cause to use over the years, though not for some time. And when they were out on the street and hustling toward a bus stop, Salima said, We need to restore everything in the building to factory defaults. He shook his head. I thought you'd already done that. Yes, and you and your friends have undone it. He started to deny it, and she cut him off. I'm not a fool, Ibrahim. I don't even disagree, but I turned them down today. I told them I would not help them sell unlocked codes to our friends, and they're angry with me, and they're going to try to punish me for it. And they're going to watch us all very closely, and they're working with the owners of Dorchester Towers. That was a gasp, but a good one. After all, the landlords were getting a commission from them, so they had to have some kind of relationship. So we need to get everything put back before they catch us. He walked several steps in silence. Then, it won't stay that way. Too many people know how to jailbreak. I know that, but we need to invent a better way. Y had talked about virtual machines, and there was a clue in there. The message boards were, as usual, full of disagreements, speculations, insults, boasts, spam, and obscenity. Ibrahim had grudgingly gone through Salima's notebook and pointed out the apartments that he knew to be jailbroken, including a few that she'd never been able to get to admit it. And working together, they'd gone door to door again, bringing along Nadifa for moral support, ringing doorbells long after any decent hour, working until they were so tired that they started making foolish mistakes. And then they'd take turns working in each apartment, and one of them reverting the devices and the other one talking to the people there, especially the kids, about the importance of leaving everything as it is, just for a little while until they could come up with a better solution. Searching for virtual machines on the message boards made things a little clearer, but it also sent them down a rabbit hole of reading about computer science ideas neither of them fully had the background for. Thankfully, there were a lot of Boulangism and Disher owners around the world who were also unqualified to understand virtual machines, but nevertheless insistent that someone explain to them, and they were able to piece together something like comprehension. And it helped that between them, Nadifa, Salima, and Ibrahim could read 7 languages. Computers, it seemed, were in some important way all the same. Every computer shared a common heritage, an architecture that let it run any program that could be written in computer languages in software code. And some computers were faster or had more memory than others, and some of them expected the instructions to be written in different ways, but even the slowest computer could run in the most complicated programs, though it might take years to accomplish a task that another computer could do in an eye blink. But you didn't need to translate the code to get it to run on a different computer. Instead, you could write a computer program that was, in effect, a computer itself. You could write a computer program that could run on a disher whose purpose was to run Boulangism programs. Yes, you could convince your dishwasher that it was a toaster. And when the toaster inside your dishwasher gave the instruction to turn on a heating element or take a picture of the food in the bay to test its doneness, the dishwasher running a computer could send it any data it wanted, and it would blindly trust it. This was the virtual machine, an imaginary computer inside another computer. And if that wasn't weird enough, you could run a Boulangism virtual machine inside a Boulangism, making the toaster pretend to be another toaster, which seemed like a kind of flourish or a game to Salima, until Ibrahim got it in a flash and explained it. If you have a toaster that has been jailbroken, you can run a virtual toaster inside it. And then you can run a regular factory version of the toaster software on the virtual toaster. And whenever the factory contacts your toaster, it sends the communications to the virtual toaster, and the virtual toaster tells it how to answer in a way that seems unmodified. It's like taking an enemy hostage and making him tell you what to tell his commanding officer so he won't get suspicious. He rubbed his hands together. Does it work? He shrugged and pointed at his screen. They say it does, but they wouldn't know for sure, would they? I wish I could ask Rai, she said. She would know. You said she told you about the virtual machines. Yes, but she was just thinking out loud. Maybe she thought it over and found a flaw in the plan. He didn't even look up from the screen where she'd been avidly reading about virtual machines. You could ask her. It wouldn't be fair to her. Nothing is fair. He said it so nonchalantly that it shocked her. Such a small boy and such a big thought. She went so far as to look up Y's number, but she didn't dial it. Instead, she got her boulangism and helped Ibrahim install a virtual machine on it. They were going to have to get very good at this. And the next day, that boulangism relaunched, and every virtual machine and every toaster and dishwasher chimed awake and announced the new exciting unlocking offer. And these alerts loaded in little windows that they had to tap to upsize and read before dismissing them. And they all spent the day with tight shoulders and quick movements, jumping every time they got a buzz. Sure, it was someone at home telling them they'd been raided, or that everything had stopped working, or that the landlords were at the door telling them to get out. But the day passed, and the next, and cautiously, one muscle at a time, they relaxed. Salima was very good at baking. She had discovered Nordic breads and made 4 little cardamom buns every morning, dusted with cinnamon, and she ate one and gave 3 to the first 3 people she met in the stairwell on the way down, still warm, leaving behind a smell that was better than the nicest whiff of perfume you might encounter in the elevator after it had been vacated by someone from the other side. She was waiting for the boulangism to chime in when her screen rang. She almost didn't answer it, blocked number, an early hour, almost certainly a spammer, but she slid her finger across it. Salima. Y's voice was tight, a little out of breath. Salima's shoulder wound themselves as tight as tennis rackets. Somewhere in her mind, she'd always expected this call. Yes, the virtual machines you're using aren't fooling them anymore. They sent out an update that is designed to break on VMs. I just checked your building. You're just hanging out there now. There's no way they'll miss it. Ugh. She squeezed her eyes shut. The boulangism chimed, and the door opened. The smell of cinnamon and cardamom and fresh bed, and the sound of her blood thundering in her ears. Oh, but there's a fix. A fix? The VM I use for testing, it's undetectable. It had to be, or I wouldn't be able to do simulations in my lab. I've packaged it and... No, why? Yes, Salima, you aren't going to risk everything for me. You aren't going to get caught because I didn't help you. Salima hadn't thought of it like that. The people in her building would get caught if Salima didn't help them, and that would destroy her. And Salima would get caught if Y didn't help her. So, yes, Y. And Y actually laughed a tiny, tight sound. I'll send you something. She named a darknet site, one that Salima had an account on, though she'd never discussed it with Y. And she wondered how much Y knew about what she'd been up to in the weeks since they'd spoken. Ibrahim hadn't left for school yet, and Adifa didn't even hesitate when Salima said they'd need him for the day. Her notebook was scuffed and dog-eared from being carried through the apartment so many times. You trust her? She nodded. If all she wanted to do was get me in trouble, it would be much easier than this. The new VM and its control software was much tidier than anything they'd downloaded from the darknet. It hid itself very well unless you knew the multi-touch pattern to swap your screen for the real jailbroken controls to the sham controls of the VM. The notes with it promised that it would also be perfectly hidden from boulangism's network tools. It was easy enough to install, just an update so the settings they all already had were in place. But it was also morning when many people were heading out for the day, leaving their appliances exposed to the company's snoopy probing. They worked out a system. She'd knock on a door, explain things quickly to whoever answered, and then send in Adi to start working. And then she'd go to the next door and the next, talking urgently, begging people to leave their doors unlocked for them. And Adi finished one apartment and then on to the next. Just looking. And then to the next, letting himself into the unlocked places. And then they go to the old people, the disabled people, the stay-at-home moms, but they had to get to these places before their occupants left. And she raced from one place to the next and managed nearly all of them and got phone numbers for the 4 she'd missed and trekked upstairs back to Adi, frantically dialing them, getting and leaving messages, and for the other 2, she'd call them back. It was a good thing that Y's software was so slick and easy to install because Salima was a wreck, though Ibrahim was all teenage cool and bravado, making short work of each place, chest puffed out, and an easy smile playing over his lips as he concentrated. But they were doing it. By lunch, they were more than halfway through, and they knocked on the door of the old Serbian man, and he insisted on giving them peanut butter on crackers, which they both gobbled, surprised at how hungry they were. Salima remembered that she'd had 4 cardamom buns in her toaster and ran to get them, and they ate each one and left the extra for the Serb. And he smiled and waved at them as they walked down the hall to the next place. And just as they were descending the stairs to the next floor, Salima's screen rang. Nadifa? The voice was urgent. The landlords are knocking on the doors, where, starting on 41, they were just at our place inspecting the appliances. They'd done their own apartments first, partly to make sure they knew what they were doing, partly because they thought that the landlords might start with them. Okay, they didn't find anything. Whatever you did, it worked. Okay, they're getting in the elevator. Okay. For a moment, all she could hear was the whoosh thud, blood in her ears, and she realized she was staring at her phone blankly. Ibrahim was looking at her with alarm. How many left? She pulled out the notebook, tattered with annotations in both hands. 24. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. 24. The landlords in the elevators. Her place was safe, and that's where the landlords would go next. The remaining places were scattered among the 7 poor floors. There were 4 floors above them, 3 below. She took the notebook from Ibrahim and tore out the pages for the 4 floors above and folded them and put them in the back of her jeans. Do the bottom 3, she said. Be careful. Check before you go in the hallways. Don't let the landlords see you. If they catch you, don't let them get the notebook. He had gone a shade paler, his teenage bravado drained. He swallowed audibly. He looked at the remaining notebook pages, scanned down them. Okay. He turned, but she caught him and gave him a fierce hug. Go, she whispered, and she turned on her heel and raced up the stairs. A calm descended on her as she stepped onto the next floor. There were 3 unlocked apartments on this one, no person she'd have to talk to. And so she stepped onto the first one, eyes moving around to take in the appliances, matching them to her list, 1, 2, 3, pulled the USB out of her pocket. She hadn't remembered to warn Adi to ditch that if in danger. But he would know that, wouldn't he? And stepped to the toaster and lifted it with sure economical motion. 1 apartment, 2, 3, stairwell, 2 more here, people in them. Ring the first bell. Exposed and anxious, the hum of the elevators in the shaft a few yards away. Heart thudding, armpit slick. USB gripped so tight in her fist it hurt. The woman who answered was old, but she stood tall and clear-eyed, thin and wrinkled and brown. Salima remembered she'd been a pediatrician in Damascus. She'd had once played the violin, but the arthritis had swollen her knuckles and took that from her. Landlords in the building, Salima whispered. The woman stepped to one side and let her work. And when Salima was done, the woman stopped and clutched at her hand, fingers brittle, dry, and bent. Thank you, she said, and gave a small squeeze. And the feeling lingered on Salima's hand, and she consulted her notes and rang the next bell. She ducked into the stairwell, and her phone buzzed. She checked it. Landlords in the stairwell. Oh. She could hear stealthy movement now, soft tread of shoes, someone ascending, trying to keep it silent. There was another stairwell at the other end of Dorchester, reserved for emergencies, with an alarm door. The steps drew closer. She opened the door again and went back in the hallway. She could knock on someone's door, trying to get rid of the notebook and USB before the landlords came. And if she failed, they would all be in trouble. She and Adi had nearly done it. Perhaps 6 apartments remained, too few, she thought, for the landlords to be able to evict them all for conspiracy. She could hear the steps from the stairwell now. They weren't bothering to be quiet. They must have heard the door shut behind her. The elevator hummed. She was trapped. She crossed her arms over her chest, spread her feet apart, and waited. The elevator doors opened before the stairwell door, and she turned to face it, not letting any fear show. A cool mask. That's what she'd show them. Ibrahim was inside. Get in, he hissed. The doors shut and the elevator lurched into motion. Ibrahim pushed the lobby button. They're in the lobby too, he said, so we can't go there. The elevator was descending rapidly. The floor counter hit 35 and then displayed the 2 hyphens, line. It showed as they raced past the full price floors. They'd be in the lobby in seconds. Adi. He smiled and pressed a rapid sequence on the elevator panel, fingers racing inshore. The elevator slowed, stopped. The doors opened. The other doors. The doors that opened into the rich floor. Come on. They stepped out into the hall. Its carpet was a rich purpley brown and it had neat lines from a robot vacuum that had swept its nap in a uniform direction. Adi, he smiled. I figured out the elevators the day after they stopped the elevator captains. It wasn't hard. On the poor floors, the elevator infographics only showed the positions of the cars when they were traversing the floors they were allowed to stop at, seeming to vanish between 42 in the penthouse, 35 in the lobby. Here, the infographics showed it all. A car stopped at 37, went up to 38. No resident of the poor floors would waste their time calling an elevator for a single floor's ride. That was the landlords, with special fobs that would summon an elevator directly even to the poor floors. Now what, she said. She was still making sense of what Adi had done. He showed her the notebook with tick marks beside every entry. Now we need to finish your list. 2 more floors to go, 35 and 36. She handed him a sheet and took one herself, and then he summoned another elevator, pressed another fast sequence, and then 35 and 36. And when the doors opened, he sprinted into the hall, all recklessness, not even checking to see whether the landlords were waiting. She was more careful when the doors opened on 36, peering around the door, stepping into the hall, and then she too sprinted for the last door on the list. Another VM for your updates going in next week. Is that enough time? Salima tapped her screen and replied, "You are a very bad employee, Wyoming. I suppose I am, but you are a good friend. Thank you, Y. Anytime." Salima stretched and stood. She had to go to work now. The ice cream parlor. They were doing a roaring trade now, thanks to an unusually warm spring. They had a new flavor she adored too. Black olive brittle and goat cheese, which was the weirdest ice cream she had ever tasted, but also the best. She collected her cardamom buns and checked her hair in the mirror, and the screen buzzed. "Send me the cardamom bun recipe, please." She did, and then she left for work. So that's the end of Unauthorized Bread from Cory Doctorow's Radicalized. This is the last section. If you haven't listened to the first two, I would suggest checking them out. And I think what I'm going to do is on each of those, I'm going to pin a copy of my recent piece that I wrote that talks about social impact finance and refugees. Because I think it's really important as we sort of frame out this narrative that we understand what it's built on. And while again, this stuff is coming after everyone eventually, to sort of move to a place where we're framing it as, the insurance companies are going to be mad that we eat chips, is really doing a disservice to the grave harm that's being built into these systems. When I first started doing my education work and finding out about blockchain, the Illinois Task Force Working Group, this was, I think, a 2018 report. They were already doing a thought experiment. They hadn't actually done a pilot on it, but they were planning on how they could use blockchain to shape SNAP benefits. And, then the next step for that would be to shape it to the appliances that you use and create these new revenue streams. And I think we can't disregard the fact that affordable housing, tiny home villages, all of this stuff is going to be built in. So, I just really ask folks to, maybe take a pause from some of the fear porn, pharma drops, patriot stuff, and read what I wrote, because it matters. And these people know what was coming. I mean, this is predictive programming, but it's useful. I think we can use it in a useful way. So thanks for tuning in. I'm thinking about what next book we're going to read. Actually, I was talking with my friend Deep D, and we have some ideas about maybe the next thing. So anyway, bye everybody.